Welcome back to ModCons. Today I'm joined by Jimmy McLoughlin. Is that how I say it?
Yeah, it is.
Amazing. And I gave it a bit of edge as well. So Jimmy is a former business advisor for the UK Prime Minister, specialising in tech and entrepreneurship. He started his podcast, Jimmy's Jobs of the Future, in 2020. He has since established it as a podcast powerhouse, interviewing everyone from Tony Blair and the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, to the founders of some of the country's most successful startups. You've got Clio, Octopus, Huel, Gymshark, the list goes on. We're not just delighted, but honoured to have him on the podcast with us today. And at Jimmy's Jobs HQ, thank you so much. I've got the professional setup here. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Great to be on.
Thank you. And you gave us a very kind review as well, may I add. Thank you so much.
Of
Gave us
course.
a bit of kudos on Apple Podcasts. I appreciate it.
Great show.
Thank you. So, Jimmy, you started your podcast during the pandemic. It's a great time to launch a business and test an idea with an audience potentially ready to listen. What made you want to start up, and did you think you'd have the success that you have today?
I wanted to start because I was worried I was going to go absolutely insane, and I'll explain why that's the case. Did I think it would be as successful as it has? I still don't think of it as successful. I still think of like striving and whatever. I do think when you do read through the guests and so on, like it is extraordinary, and I feel very lucky to do it. But I also think there's a real need, and I think particularly with the rise of AI, people understand more and more about what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do in my quest to become the Martin Lewis of jobs. Exactly. But the founding story of it is, so I left Downing Street at the end of 2019, and I had done 3 years with Theresa May, and I did a few weeks with Boris Johnson in the transition team. And I said to him, look, I need to go do something else, and we're about to have our first baby, and so on. So I sort of left Downing Street in the summer of 2019, and our first baby arrived a few weeks later. And it was funny, quite a few friends commented to me a few weeks after, they're like, gosh, you're the first person that we've ever seen that's had a baby and looks remarkably better for it 3 weeks later. Because I was sleeping, I was like, and all that. And so basically I was like, well, I'll figure out what I want to do in my career next. And I decided I needed to get out of London. I needed to get away from Westminster and so on. And I went out to study at Stanford University on one of their exec courses for 2 months, which was an amazing experience on its own. But my wife's condition for doing this and taking our young family out there was that we would rent a camper van at the end of the course and drive around Yosemite and so on, which was amazing. All three of us sleeping in the back of this camper van. We didn't have any mobile phone signal, which was also wonderful, happy family times. The problem with not having any phone signal was it was the first week of March 2020, which I think everyone kind of remembers that and where they were anywhere in the world. And we got signal and realised that all of a sudden this COVID thing, which was on our radar, was like a lot more serious. And my wife is a doctor, so we flew back to the UK, and she was like, it's my, this is my D-Day, I've got to go back. And she called her boss, and they were like, yeah, can you get back in next week? And so then we were all plunged into lockdown, etc. And I was with this 5-month-old. So I'd gone from like Downing Street to diapers.
Yeah.
And I was there, and the parents of young children will know that with a 5-month-old you can't really do much. They can't move.
No.
They can't watch TV. We couldn't see anyone. We had our 1 hour government allotted walk around the park a day. So that meant we got like 11 hours to fill, just me and a 5-month-old, and it was kind of crazy. So basically, we listened to lots of audio.
Yeah.
And we basically had meal times alongside Radio 4. So it's like we had breakfast with the Today programme, we had lunch with World at 1, we had tea with PM, right? And I just thought to myself, like, is there something I can do to help tackle the unemployment crisis that's going to be coming up? And I thought that basically, could I start a podcast which explored jobs? And it was also partly, I thought back to the conversation I used to have at No.10 quite a lot, where I would get Debenhams or Wilkinsons would call me as the business advisor and be like, just let you know, we're going to go into administration. It's going to be announced later today. And there would be 10,000 jobs at risk, I would go in and tell this wonderful news to the PM at the 8 a.m. meeting, and she would say to me, Jimmy, all you ever tell me about is job losses.
Yeah.
You never tell me about where jobs are being kind of created. You know, we're at almost record high levels of employment. Where are these jobs coming from? And so that was the essence of the show to begin with, was, well, let's go and interview entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They're the ones creating the jobs. They don't make jobs announcements because they're hiring 1 or 2 jobs. And let's go and do them. And so that was the reason why I started, was because I needed something to keep me sane.
Yeah.
And I also thought it might help me find my next job.
Yeah, true.
But it turns out that
It became your next
it
job.
became my job, basically, which I feel very kind of like lucky and privileged to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't a sort of destined thing necessarily.
Yeah, love that. So the initial premise, Jimmy, of the podcast was to interview entrepreneurs about where they thought the jobs of the future were coming from. After 6 years now of interviewing these entrepreneurs, what do you think these jobs are, and have they changed over that time span?
That is a great question. So fundamentally, I don't think the skills have changed actually that much. I think they are going to with AI, and I think we're going into one of the biggest changes in our economic history that we've ever seen. I think the jobs are 7 out of every 8 jobs in the United Kingdom are in the private sector.
Yeah.
And the private sector's job is to research a product, build that product, take that product to market, and persuade people to buy it.
Yeah.
That is the same in like every company and business. And that isn't going to change.
Right.
All the tools that people use, think about your job, or people at home think about their jobs, and if they were working 10 years ago, I dare say the job looks completely different now than it did then, right? So in some ways, I think we can overstate the kind of like job apocalypse coming. That being said, I do think there are even more kind of serious changes coming. And I think there will be, you know, when I go to schools, one of the things I often say is like, look at the sectors that are growing, right? So I often talk about energy and defence as being like 2 of the really big ones. Care, healthcare, and elderly care as well. And so look towards those kind of areas for it. But yeah, like overall, I think we'll end up with you know, more jobs will be created. Like you look at us, we're a podcast studio that employs like 5 or 6 in our team. None of those jobs existed 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great example of it. And but in the same way, they're just radio jobs.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like
Repurposed.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you think the whole AI conversation has been like overplayed, or do you think people underestimate like the power of AI and the impact it will have? I
think that ordinary person, it's probably not sort of in their kind of daily focus at the moment.
Yeah.
I think it could become much more serious. You know, you've mentioned we've had like Peter Kyle, Keir Starmer on the podcast, and one of the questions that I asked them was about, you know, when do you think AGI will be here? And they said by the time of the next election. And I was just like, if that happens, we could be in for a very different conversation. You know, our whole economic model and base will change, and that is a really like fundamental thing. Yet we still get, you know, Westminster gets quite focused on, you know, personalities and changing revolving doors, etc.
Yeah. Well, tittle tattle, they do love that, don't they? I think it's just a gossip culture in the UK. We do love a gossip.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Westminster, right?
Yeah. It's like, what did somebody say about Tim Shipman's book? It was like 800 pages of posh gossip.
Yeah, it really is.
I think it's like quite a good description of it.
It really is. So, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I try to say I'm an entrepreneur. So I recently launched a business to help young people discover jobs in construction.
Yeah.
Engineering as well. And in my business, apprenticeships are a huge pull for young people who want to earn and learn, because obviously student loans are out of control. But demand really outstrips supply. What do you think needs to be done to kind of reform apprenticeships? Bridget Phillipson recently reduced the window in which companies can spend their levy pots from, I think, 24 months to 12 months. Is this the kind of push business needs, or is it just more government interference? Should they just be left alone? And where is that balance between like creating a framework and like being overbearing?
Yeah, really interesting question. So I think we need a cultural change around apprenticeships,
Right.
and that's really hard.
Yeah.
But government definitely has a role to play in that, and I think it is happening as well. I was at a very good private school the other day doing a talk, and I was quite struck by the amount of the sixth form that wanted to do degree apprenticeships, and they're very hard, they're very in demand, etc. But hopefully that kind of like cultural change is beginning to happen.
Yes.
And I think the automatic idea of going to university people are questioning it now more because of the student loans and things that you're mentioning. And I don't think that's a bad thing either. So overall, I feel like we're moving in the right places, but there is still this like mismatch of jobs and skills, right? Like, Amazon, we had on the podcast the other day, the UK country manager, John Bomfrey, they employ 70,000 people in the UK. And they can't hire the staff enough. And we have 1 million people under 24 not in educational work. And you're like, how is this still sort of mismatched?
Right.
And I think it's partly we're slightly training people for the wrong things and so on. Gavin Barwell, actually, it's funny how these memories sort of come back to you. Gavin Barwell was Chief of Staff at No.10, used to be the MP for Croydon. And he made the point when he would go around Croydon colleges of like, there were loads of courses around hairdressing, but there were barely any about construction, right? And then it's like that afternoon, he'd be going to a construction site around Croydon, which is kind of like booming and so on. And they're just like, we can't get the staff.
And that's a job you would literally have for life. People will always need somewhere to live.
I also think it's a great job.
It's a
right?
great
So
job. It pays a lot.
I spend a lot of time thinking about like jobs that I would like to do in sort of different lives and who are the happiest people that I encounter.
Yeah.
And I think construction work, being a brickie, like I think is actually really quite a cool job. You get to work outside, camaraderie. Those guys that are on TikTok that do all the videos and whatever, like they clearly have like a great time. And you're literally physically building something. And I think that is one of the things I have learned about jobs is people that are connected to what they do and can see the fruits of their labour directly really kind of enjoy it. Do you want to hear some of my other favourite jobs?
Yes, please. Tell us.
So, well, I think mechanics.
Okay.
I wish I was good at cars.
Okay, engineering, hands-on stuff.
Sorting stuff out, problem solving, helping people.
Yeah.
And if you really like cars, I just bet it's quite fun to
definitely
spend your day around cars.
Jaguar, Land Rover, not a bad place to work.
Exactly. I'd say another one is people who look after the young children always.
It is nice because they're always like interesting and random, and you learn so much from kids.
Totally right.
The way they just walk around talking to themselves, I always find that so funny because we just can't do that. We just can't get away with that. It's not fair. Jimmy, so one of the things I always talk about, so I wrote a lot in City AM, and I always used to talk about Rachel Reeves and Brexit, because there was a point where a millionaire was leaving the country every 45 minutes. And that was kind of between her first two budgets. Do you think that's kind of been overplayed? Do you think that kind of wealth exit, that flight has been overplayed? And do you think we have lost a lot of like private sector investment because those people have left? Or do you think it's been slightly over-egged?
Oh, it's a good question. I do think it's changed because you're right. There was a definite peak of it.
Yeah.
And I think there is now, partly because of the challenges in the Middle East and so on, people have come back. That was where a lot of places were going. And I remember at one point being quite shocked and alarmed by it all, that I was doing some data with ChatGPT about when Dubai was going to enter the sort of top 10 British cities.
Yes.
Because that was the pace of it. But I now think there is also something happening in London, particularly around London maxing, and there is this bit of a fight back a little bit. I think it's partly been since sort of like Musk and Trump were sort of railing against London, right? I think it's a bit like family members, right? It's like you can kind of be rude about your own family, but the moment somebody else is, and I feel that's happened a little bit in terms of people standing up for London now. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff, particularly happening in the King's Cross area and so on. And I feel there's a bit of a this it really is the world's greatest city and so on. But there was a definite point about like when we were losing a lot of millionaires.
Well, I don't know if Andy Burnham would agree that it's the greatest city.
Well, no.
He might have something to say about that.
Exactly.
But on that, actually, you recently had a very interesting chat with Tom Kerridge about the impacts the government policy in general has had on retail and hospitality. But playing devil's advocate, do you think, do we have too many hospitality and retail businesses? Is it time to just let the market decide, if people aren't using them? Do you think we just need to accept that consumer trends have changed and use this as an opportunity to kind of rethink our high streets and rethink how our towns perform, or is that sacrilege?
Well, look, you always need to rethink how the high street works and operates and what it's going to be.
Yeah.
But I don't particularly want pubs and restaurants replaced with vape shops.
No, not that.
Right? So, I feel there has to be there has to be support for these places.
Yeah.
And. Yeah, I ate in a pizzeria last night. Actually, I was thinking I must leave these guys a review. They were brilliant. And I think it's really important. I think one of the challenges with business that's happened is just pretty much everything that could go wrong in hospitality has in the last few years. You've had the increase in national minimum wage. You've had the increase in national in the NICs, the employment legislation, and then you also have all the kind of geopolitical challenges, cost inflation of things coming, importing and so on.
Yes.
So it's just like they've been hit from every single angle. I think that was Tom's kind of point on it, was like we've just had every business tries to build Slack into their systems in some way, and essentially they've just been squeezed from every angle. And I think it's so important because hospitality is so many people's entry to the workplace.
Agree.
And I started work as a waiter.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I think, God, I've learned a huge amount. Didn't necessarily sort of particularly feel that at the time, but teamwork, how to take responsibility, problem solving. I mean, that's what hospitality is most of the time, is like problem solving and interacting with the public.
Yeah.
And they're really important skills,
Totally.
right? Like that you don't necessarily pick up at school.
No.
So, yeah.
No, I agree. And I think a lot of young people as well, they're very anxious about talking on the phone and things like that.
Yes.
And I think being a waitress, it's forced upon you. You just have to kind of speak to someone. So those jobs are so important.
I mean, you do get this every so often. People getting I can't believe we've got to teach Gen Z how to use the phone. It's but to be fair to them, there aren't house phones.
No.
So what?
Why would they?
Why would they know? I mean, that's what I used to have to. That's how I learned, right?
Yeah.
It was you would answer the phone and
In your best voice for your
yeah,
mum. Yeah.
Exactly.
Can I take a message?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's not all doom and gloom, I think. There are lots of businesses launching. In 2016, we had 664,000 companies formed. 2021, 800,000. 2025, 832. What do you think the government has done well on business?
Well, so I think it is pretty much easier to start a business than it's ever been, right? And I think in a way now you're getting more people with side hustles as well, and having creative outlets, and that's great, right? You can start a business. I mean, you can register an Instagram handle, and that is effectively a business and a marketing and distribution tool that you can reach hundreds of millions of people with, in theory. So there's lots of quite exciting opportunity like that. I sometimes worry that, because basically you used to have to, if you want to start a business, you had to stop work on the Friday and start the business on the Monday. You were basically betting all on black, right? Now you can kind of hedge. You can see if you've got a bit of a market. You can test things, see if you enjoy it as well, right? That's the thing I think is one of the big challenges with professional life is knowing what a job is and what it entails before you start. It's very difficult to know.
Yeah, totally. And there are, like I say, lots of people starting up. But you reflected recently that CEOs could learn from modern politicians and try and be more authentic, and be, the face of the brand in a way. I think a little bit that's been happening with a lot of those DTC brands like Glossier being like founder led and kind of building up a following, then going direct to the consumer and trying to, avoid that merchandise wing or that wholesale kind of buyer. Do you think, like, there are in the UK, we have like people like Ewan Blair of Multiverse, with Grace Beverley, obviously Stephen Bartlett, they're like the major consumer brands. We do have founder-led brands, but then they also face a backlash. Like, I think all of those have had, especially Stephen Bartlett, Ewan Blair, they've had that kind of backlash from the public. Do you think there's a danger in like putting yourself out there? Is it worth the risk? And what would your advice be, as someone who's been like an advisor at the very, very top? What would you suggest? Like, how should they navigate that as an emerging entrepreneur, balance that risk?
It's a really interesting and thought-provoking question, because they both have faced backlash.
Yeah.
And both quite unfairly, in my view, as well. So I think about this stuff where you sort of get criticism, you get comments on YouTube, Instagram, and whatever. And I always just think, if I wouldn't take advice from this person, then I'm not too fussed about their criticism, really. And but if a friend were to call me and say, I think you've gone a bit far on that, or something, that would be that's different.
Strike a nerve a little bit.
That would strike a nerve, and you would sort of take that. But if
Yeah.
you're worried about every piece of criticism on the internet, nobody would get anything done any of the time. So I think Stephen's had a lot of like pushback on various things, most recently for the sort of comments about a glass of wine and how it ruined 3 days of his life. And I think it's like I understand why that's kind of like caught traction and so on, and it's sort of caused a big pile on Stephen Bartlett. But I just think overall, like, he is a force for good. And I know a lot of people say, he exaggerates wealth and success, etc. But actually, it is a guy that came from a single parent family household in his 20s and built a business that was worth multiple millions of pounds. Maybe not hundreds of millions, but still multiple millions of pounds. That is impressive.
Yeah.
Like, there's no two ways about it. And actually, the company that he's just raised money for has been valued at 400 million. So I think there's a lot to be said. I know him and his business partner, Social Chain, Don McGregor, a bit, and I think like they've done an incredible job. And we should be a bit, kind of like prouder of it. He is now the world's second biggest podcaster. He's done incredibly well. He is a champion for Britain, and it shows that wherever you come from in this country, you can be successful. So,
agree. Do you think we have a culture, like, because we're quite like self-deprecating, we don't really like it when people get too big for their boots or get too famous or too, successful, and start to find them kind of annoying? There's also that element of business as well. It's like we're kind of scared about what people will think. We're scared to fail. We're scared to get too big. Do you think there's an element of that restricts our kind of entrepreneurial spirit? In America, they're very much like, they wear their failure as a badge of honor. Do you think our culture around success is slightly too sheepish? Or
I think that is true. I don't think we would want to go as far as the American model, right?
Maybe.
Like, one of my favourite articles was written after the 2012 London Olympics in The Economist, and it just painted a really great picture of how the city had kind of come together and so on. And it had this great line in it, which was about the British being the sort of most self-deprecating nation on earth. Brackets, it comes from an inner sense of self-security about being better than everyone else.
Yes.
I thought that like really sums it up. Like, and so I think, I'd love to see success champion more and so on. It is in our culture a little bit. But I think there are so many kind of like great stories that are out there. And I think we are under-risked, and people don't take enough risk when it comes to careers and so on. And I think people often talk about entrepreneurs being the love of risk and so on. And there is some truth in that, but also at the same time, it's like there is a risk in not taking action.
Yes,
not taking a risk.
totally. Well, I think a lot of people they seem to slightly be at the moment trapped in this kind of, I don't know, sense of, trapped in a salary wage bracket. They're too scared to go up because they'll get taxed too much. They're too scared to take a risk on it all and start their own thing. And it was really interesting. You had a conversation with the founder of Clio, Barney Hussey-Yo. And I have two questions on this, but the second part of my question was about the fact that he says that labour here is super cheap. And he says he can get really highly educated talent at a bargain because wages have stagnated, which is absolutely mad, but quite incredible that he's acknowledging that. Do you think we have a problem here where we're not valuing our talent enough?
Barney is...
He's really funny.
Yeah, he is really funny, and he's always provocative. And he's definitely worth getting thoughts on. So I think, he's talking about AI, machine learning talent specifically.
Right.
I think he had this phrase where he was like, where he talked about, they talk about it as TC, total compensation.
Right.
And he said in that crazy weekend when OpenAI was sort of looking like they were getting rid of Sam Altman and whatever, that's a couple of years ago now, but he was like speaking to some OpenAI people and was trying to recruit, etc. And it was like fascinating how they were talking about their kind of like whole package, etc. So look, it's a problem across the board that wages have stagnated, right? Like it's a real challenge, and people are feeling it now. A bit like we were talking earlier about how business builds slack into their personal lives, into their businesses. I think people try and do that. Not everyone has the ability to be able to do that. But part of the problem that you had in 2022 with the kind of like inflation spike was that that ate into it. You had inflation running at 12% at one point. And it doesn't start going into minus inflation, right? That 12% is then just baked in. Yeah. So, it's a real challenge.
It is. And the other thing that he talked about was that, he was growing in the US and scaling in the US. And we do kind of have that issue. He said he doesn't expect to list in the UK. We do have that issue of like not enough of our companies listing here and on the FTSE. Have any entrepreneurs mentioned that to you? Have they spoken to you about why they don't want to list here? Is it just too much regulation or not enough of an exciting private venture capital market?
It's a lot. They don't tend to talk about it on the podcast. They tend to sort of talk about it like, the other side of the studio. Yeah. There are so many factors involved with it. I think there is a sort of there's a cultural challenge, and there's also a challenge around a lot of entrepreneurial technology businesses are valued in very different ways. Yes. That the US is a bit more sophisticated at kind of understanding, right? There are examples of firms in the UK that have millions of Instagram followers. Now, how do you value that sort of like direct? It's not easy to do that, and sort of the stereotypical London city banker in their 50s, pinstripe suit and so on might not quite get that as much as someone in the States. So there's a challenge around that. I think it will be very interesting to see what Andy Burnham does when he becomes PM with the city, etc. Because you need the city firing, and you want to get more companies listed here. You want to make that more ambitious because of all the kind of like knock-on effects it has. Yeah.
And so obviously, as I mentioned, you were a special advisor for business, tech and entrepreneurship under Theresa May and for a short time Boris. What was that time like? Did it feel more optimistic then, or was, the proximity to decision making what made it optimistic?
Gosh, so I think there was quite a lot of optimism then, actually. And I think, I remember quite a few business leaders who were definitely not in support of Brexit, who were like, actually, I could get on board with it now. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said for it. And the world was changing, right? In the first election, Donald Trump and so on, you could feel the tectonic plates of geopolitics shifting. And so I think there was some optimism. And I remember a couple of times people saying to me in that job between 2016 and 2019, the thing is Britain's a laughing stock around the world, and sort of pushing back on that quite hard at the time, just being like, you might not agree with Brexit, you might not think it's a good idea, but it is a perfectly legitimate decision the British people have taken not to be in a political union with 27 other countries.
Yes.
Like, I don't see anywhere else in the world really doing that. And so, it's not a laughingstock thing. Now, fast forward 10 years, we're about to go on to our, 7th or 8th Prime Minister in that period.
Yeah.
Probably about to have our 10th Business Secretary in 8 years. Like, it's difficult to sort of, not think that now we are a bit of a laughingstock and we're kind of turning into Italy and so on. So I think it's a real challenge for how we deal with that. I was in Cannes, right, for the Creativity Festival, Cannes Lions, and I was on, because Starmer resigned on the Monday, and I was on stage on the Tuesday, and I sort of made my sort of joke about being a former Downing Street special advisor. It used to be a really impressive line. And I updated the gag being like, not as of Monday, by the way. It was like a bit further back than that. And somebody came and saw me afterwards, and they were like, a couple of people actually who were like, did Keir Starmer resign yesterday? I was like, yes. I was like, this used to be big news.
No one can keep up.
I had mates texting me on the Monday morning about stuff, right? And I was just like, can we not just like appreciate for a second here? The Prime Minister's just resigned this morning, and we're just like chattering on about weekend plans and whatever. Yeah, these are quite like sort of like political university groups and whatever. I was just like, come on, like this used to be like a moment in the nation's history, and now it doesn't even get a passing comment in a university WhatsApp group.
It doesn't. There wasn't much fanfare either. Like he stood down.
I think it'd been quite drawn. I mean, part of it is quite drawn out, and like people had known it was coming. But like, it used to be like a real sort of thing. But anyway.
Well, I saw a Vox Pop the other day of a guy who thought that Theresa May was still PM. So maybe no one knows. No one knows he's the PM. So what were you kind of most proud of in that role? What would you take away and be like, yeah, I did that, or I saved that, or whatever?
So look, one of the things that I was proudest of, and that was my driving force in there, was trying to get different people in front of the Prime Minister, trying to get different businesses in front of, because you have the likes of Marks and Spencer, BAE Systems, these big kind of like British iconic companies. Yeah. They have big public affairs teams. They have lots of kind of regulatory challenges. They need to be really in with government. Yeah. So they would get their kind of like seat at the table and so on. But I was always keen to kind of like bring the gym sharks, bring the, today it'd be Barney Hussey, that type of person who's doing stuff that's interesting, different, got a point of view, can say something to the Prime Minister that's going to be different and is a different outlook. And I've talked about this before, but when Ben Francis came in, I think 2017, 2018, he was brilliant, right? Yeah. Like he runs a gym wear company. Like it's not, it doesn't really have anything to do with government. Yeah. It has no need to kind of engage with the government particularly, but it's really important to hear his voice and so on. And he was excellent. So I think that was one of the things that I was kind of like proudest of. Yeah. Obviously doing that on all the trade trips as well, and so on. And then, towards the end, we had a particularly big London Tech Week, and we had lots of kind of like AI PhDs and special immigration policies for people with further education in AI. Right. And I like to think now that was quite sort of forward-thinking 2019 and so on. So there's some of the things that I'm proud about. And also securing, it's difficult to overplay my role in this, but one of the things that my role entailed a lot of, which I had not realised in advance, was talking about like learning jobs as you go along, was companies would invest in Britain, and often the final thing that they would do, that the Department for Trade would do, is they would sort of get a trip to No.10 to kind of like agree it all, or be the we try and get in and persuade them and so on. And so I did a lot of that, which was often quite just quite motivating. I sort of look back on it now, and I basically just had to like be a patriot for Britain and like tell them why like Britain was going to be amazing and Brexit was going to be brilliant, and like it's just like and and it was sort of like the final kind of like flourish and whatever. And we used to do it in the in the small dining room in Downing Street, which is where Gorbachev and Thatcher like thawed the cold.
Pretty iconic.
Yeah, but it was great because most of these, American business leaders often in their 50s,
Yeah.
and so that for them
Yes.
was such a kind of like formative thing. So yeah, I got, as you can tell, I had this real kind of like patter by the end of it.
Love that.
So yeah, and I really enjoyed that. So that's a sort of a few kind of
Yeah,
things.
I love that. And Ben Francis is really interesting. Like I saw him at the CPS Margaret Thatcher conference.
Yes.
And he was just super punchy, but
He was.
on the money, like every time. So we do need those young entrepreneurs who actually have like a very clear idea of what's going wrong, what they need to fix, what we as politicians or policymakers need to fix.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was so impressed by him. But going on your kind of trade stuff, what do you think brand Britain, what are we famous for? Are we famous for Adele and sausages? Is there anything else?
Sausages. So I think there's lots, and I think the BBC and our kind of creative industries,
Yes.
right? I suppose of what I sort of find myself at the heart of now is like stuff. We have like an unparalleled kind of like media landscape, and there are lots of things that we are great at that we don't perhaps appreciate. We have an amazing education system.
Yes.
We have some of the world's best historical sites. Like there's so much to kind of like brand Britain that sometimes I think you don't kind of appreciate as much. And some of these countries that we're kind of dealing with are quite new, and you sort of forget we do have an inherent private enterprise kind of built into us, right? Like I'm always think of the story of when they launched Dragon's Den in the former Soviet states. Like they had to like, explain what business was at the beginning of it, right? And also it's like places in the Middle East as well, which have seen amazing growth over the last few years. They don't have private capital markets and so on. Like so, there's a lot of things that we have that we just sort of take for granted a little bit. We just don't appreciate how strong we are in them because they're just inherent to us.
True. And I think on the Middle East, like they're very, I don't know, bombastic, I guess, unabashed about like utilizing their own resources.
Yes.
And I think we're still a bit shy about that because we've got that like moral dilemma, especially when it comes to energy, for example, where like, is it okay to drill our own oil?
Our own oil, yeah.
And on that, what do you think? So we've got a new PM incoming very soon. What do you think he should be focusing on for maybe either UK PLC or just his kind of economic agenda? What do you think Andy Burnham should be saying? Obviously, he's said a lot about devolution, but is there an industry? I spoke to a really interesting scientist who said we need to be developing our kind of genetics and biology and like building up our science as an export. Do you think it's that kind of thing? Do you think it's like you say, creative industry? What should Andy Burnham be like coming in to say, let's focus on this for Brand Britain or whatever it might be?
Well, I think life sciences is definitely like a real strength area. I mean, I think a huge focus is already happening on AI.
Yes.
If I were to give him some advice, I think like that the AI team in DCIT is doing really well and try not to change too many of the kind of personnel. I think there's just been so much churn. And we don't need our third Labour business secretary, particularly in just over 2 years. Same with the science team as well, because I actually think we've been quite good in recent years at persuading good entrepreneurs to come into government to do specific jobs, and it's gone quite well. And I just, change for change's sake doesn't help. Obviously, change is a very powerful message, and he's partly won on that basis. But just changing everything is not always the way.
No, absolutely not. And now, Jimmy, my final couple of questions.
Oh, gosh.
You have a picture of yourself with Margaret Thatcher at, 8 months old, I think it is?
You really have done your research.
I did a little dig. I actually looked at your notebook. I have a question about that, but we didn't have time, so we'll see. But you have a picture of Margaret Thatcher at 8 months old, with Margaret Thatcher at 8 months old. And you acknowledge that your life would be very different without her. For the uninitiated out there, what has Mrs. Thatcher done for you, or why do you think she was so important?
So, well, in some ways, I'm kind of the ultimate Nepo baby because my father was a Conservative politician. But His job before that
Right.
was a coal miner,
Amazing.
which is a slightly unusual background for a
Yes.
Tory MP, and one only as I have got older have I sort of appreciated quite what a route that was and is. And so he became a MP under Margaret Thatcher,
Cool.
and Margaret Thatcher kind of took a chance on him, and that's where I'm. So he was elected in the 1986 by-election.
Yeah.
He won by 100 votes.
Wow.
So that is 99 more than he needed, as he pointed out in his first television interview the next day, which I always tease him about. What's it like, your best line being your first one of your political career? And that photo was taken then. So I arrived a few months later, and then it was the 1987 by-election, general election, which is where that photo was kind of taken.
Okay, cool.
And I just think she was an incredible woman on so many. And she got, and she made stuff happen.
Yes, that's it.
That's the thing, right? She was Prime Minister for 11 years. We've gone through 7 in 10 or whatever it is. And, she's just stayed the course on it. I would love to know how she would handle today's politics, because it's different.
Yeah.
Not all the same tactics would work, etc. But I would, dearly love to get her reading on it all, and so on.
I think she would have to be on social media, right? She'd probably need a TikTok.
She would, but I'm not sure she would. There is a great clip that does the rounds every so often, which is where she's giving a TV interview and she's asked to do a hop, skip, or a jump or something at the end of it, and she's just like, no. And I just like, I think, and Andy Burnham's been praised for his social media game and so on, and it is different when you're Prime Minister, right? True. Like you've got to look the part, you've got to be serious and so on, and you've also got to get the cut through of it all and so on. So, I think. What would a Margaret Thatcher TikTok account look like?
I know, that'd be iconic.
Question for the ages.
I was at a liveried lunch earlier, and we were all going around in the garden asking who their favourite PM was, and 3 out of 4 said Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
So she did have a huge impact on the country.
Who's your favourite PM?
I'd say since I was born, probably Margaret Thatcher. The Thatcher kind of power and sense of self, and actually idea of what you want to do, and not being afraid to be unpopular for a little while. I think that was Keir Starmer's problem. He wasn't afraid. He was afraid to be unpopular. He wasn't able to sit in the discomfort of being unpopular.
What's interesting about Blair, again, in these clips that sort of go viral every so often now, is him arguing with the public.
Yeah.
And I think we sort of need a bit more of that. His book on leadership, by the way, for anyone that is interested in politics or goes into government, is a must read, right? He obviously came on Jimmy's Jobs of the Future to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I've plugged this book so much. It's been worth his sort of hour-long interview.
Yeah.
But it's such an interesting read of it. And I remember at the final TV debate between Starmer and Sunak a couple of years ago, and the last question was from a sort of elderly gentleman in his 60s who got up and just said, "Are you two really the best that your parties have got to offer?" And I just sat there and just thought, it's a bit rude is one thing, and I just thought both of them are decent people. They're both decent, honourable family men who've dedicated a lot of their life to public service, could have done other things, haven't. And I just thought, it's not a bad sort of choice.
Yeah.
But they both sort of I just wish they'd kind of push back on it a bit. And they sort of just went into their kind of stock lines and so on. But I think Britain is going to have some really serious challenges in the next few years. And I think part of what happened with COVID was we got very used to the government sorting stuff out. Totally. And the government is when it needs to work, it can swing into action incredibly, but it can't continue to sort of do all this. And this is the point about Burnham, right? It's all the challenges remain the same. Low growth, low productivity, stagnant wages now for over a decade. Some really tough conversations need to be had.
And I do worry about Burnham. He's a very good communicator and he's very likable. but from what I hear, he doesn't like to be disliked, and he's going to have to make some tough decisions. And if you want everyone to like you, it's not quite going to work. Although he did say my agenda is my agenda. There's no movement on that, so maybe he'll be tougher than.
I mean, he is a good communicator, but he's not Obama, is he? Right?
No, he's just regular. I think
he is regular.
He speaks human.
He speaks human, and I think one of the things that I point out about like Farage, Trump, and Burnham also fits into this actually is they've just been at it a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like they've just been communicating with the public. Now, Starmer obviously did like lots of communication in his job, but didn't have that sort of like you say, the sort of folksy charm. So yeah, hopefully that will help Burnham, and the fact that he's been in government before as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so on, Burnham's a big guy, not an advocate for the Westminster bubble. Do you miss anything about the Westminster bubble? And do you think the Westminster bubble is overplayed or underestimated?
So I miss the trade trips. I often get asked, do you miss Downing Street and so on? And obviously when big moments and governments change, you have a kind of like pang of, I was there for a few of them and so on.
Yeah.
So I miss the trade trips and that side of it, but I'm very happy and really enjoying what I'm building with Jimmy's Jobs and Boxlight. And then is Westminster Village, what was it, overhyped?
Is it overplayed? Is the Westminster bubble overplayed or underestimated?
It's probably both. So I think being part of the bubble and in it is actually sort of great. I think like I have lots of friends from there.
Yeah.
You build real kind of like camaraderie relationships, and I think for a young person to aspire to be kind of involved in it, and the whole ecosystem of all the think tank events and the parties and whatever and the party conferences is actually a great world to kind of be involved in. And I sort of loved it, but don't miss it. Basically, it's the thing, and I think it is where the sort of I was at a very interesting private dinner the other night, and some of the ideas that people have got there around how we kind of reshape the state and so on. And I just thought like this is where these the influencing and the changing and the idea generation is happening in this room. Like it may well be people that are making this argument to the country in a few years' time. And it's just super, super interesting. Yeah. So I think that politics and public service is a noble cause, and that everyone should go and do it at some point.
Definitely.
We
need to teach lots of young people about it. Like civic education is so it's not a thing.
No, exactly.
And it needs to be, I think.
And I think you're and it's why your podcast is so great at this. It's just like opening this world and so on. And that's like I was making this point with like Blair about like the Masters of Business Administration, like how to run a business there is a sort of sector in of itself. There is actually very little in that in terms of like a Masters of Government Administration. Yes. There is the Blavatnik School and so on, but like it should be more of a study, and we do end up getting sort of caught up with the personalities and tittle-tattle, but how you get stuff done in government is a really important thing, and I think it is one of the things that we sort of obviously haven't forgotten how to get things done in government, but that sort of element of understanding more about how it happens, I think, is really really important.
Yeah, and I think there's probably an element of gatekeeping that keeps things slow.
Yes.
Because if there were like new, interesting, like different perspectives coming in to shake things up, it might speed things up. But because everyone kind of follows the same path, trajectory, it doesn't really have that impact.
The irony of a lot of this is like it was a lot of people's reason for voting for Brexit of the kind of political class was that too often things it would be like, we can't do that because the European Union says we can't do that and so on. And that is one of the things with Brexit. It's like, okay, well that's now not an excuse really, guys. So but I think it's a it's a real challenge for learning how to get stuff done.
Yeah. And second to last question, Jimmy, what are your thoughts on the Conservative Party at the moment? Do you have any stars? Do you think they're doing well as a pack? What are your thoughts on them?
So I think Kenny's doing a really good job. I think she's clearly doing better at Prime Minister's questions and so on. I think the party's in a tough space in terms of like there's so few MPs that it is just really difficult to kind of like have energy and momentum when you're that sort of small and scrabbling around. But I think there's some very talented people there that is great to kind of see. I think Katie Lamb's superb, Harriet Cross, like there is young talent there, and I think we can be quite. But I think being the pro-business party and making that, becoming the standout party to do that is a real opportunity now. And I think one of the things, if you look at the polling, there's this great poll from Focal Data, but just about like actually the British public are of the view that we are, it's basically been the highest view ever that we are spending too much money. Like the British public, they don't follow the ins and outs of it all, but they are more in tune of just generally what's happening.
Totally.
So I think it's like I'm sort of quite optimistic about where the Conservative Party is, rather unfashionable.
Oh, good. I love that. Well, that was my last question. What gives you hope? But not just about the Conservative Party, just maybe about the country or your space or business or tech. What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that it's never been easier to gain experience.
Yes.
So at the heart of Jimmy's Jobs of the Future sits this paradox that there have never been more exciting jobs that are created, but they're harder to navigate than ever before. The static career paths and go be an accountant and plod on and so on aren't there.
Yeah.
But as we talked about with Stephen Bartlett, it's a great example of somebody who has been able to build an amazing career, an amazing company by his early 30s. Now, he got that from getting his own kind of experience. And that's the thing. Whilst getting work experience and getting that first job, in some ways at the moment it's harder than it's ever been. Actually, the ability to go out and get experience, to build a community, to build a network, has never been easier. There've never been more tools at your disposal to do it. And that is what excites me. That's what gives me hope about the world and Britain, is that it's never been easier to start and scale something. And that just makes me really, really excited.
The future is bright. There we go. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure, Jamila. Thank you so much for having me.